people placed in the hospitals, they were causing the crimes. So this was all in St Paul's, and probation service, and children that had been raped, all put into one place. So what they actually did, they redlined one neighbourhood, and they said, you can have all that problem. And then they told everybody it had never changed, and all of a sudden, it all suddenly changed. Yeah. And yeah, I see so many people that suffer through it, even like when it got to the point where in the end, there's the Mill Pond School, a gentleman was murdered. And what they used to do as well is that they would tell you that the people came from the hospital, let's say St Paul's resident. Lawrence Yu from St Paul's did this, Lawrence Yu from St Paul's did that. Well, they're not telling you this, Lawrence Yu from the Bail Hospital did this. So there's actually an active policy to hide what the problems really were. So it's not for you because you weren't here, right? I could go back to Andy Bennett, who was the superintendent at the time, and other people, and we've watched all of this and we see that over. And I think what's really painful is that when they saw value in the property, I can remember his name was Summerhill, and he was in charge of Knightstone selling when they're selling their properties. I remember going to buy some of the property, what's going on. And he said, yeah, Lawrence, he must have forgot who he was talking to. He was, yeah, but Lawrence, you know, it's like, you know, you buy an old Victorian property, an old thing, and you clear out all the rubbish, but you keep the fixings, you keep the cornice, you keep the clothing, and you keep the fireplace. But that's what we're doing with St Paul's, we're just clearing the rubbish. When we talk about the rubbish, we're talking about the community I grew up in, the people that I know. But we're going to keep the buildings. So that's the other thing, the housing stock. Like, yeah, it's old housing stock. Tell me it's not going to pay £1 million for a 4-storey Georgian property. Yeah. The thing is, with the old housing stock in St Paul's, it's very valuable old housing stock. Yeah. People want to live in a 4-storey Georgian property. And even the Victorian property. So some of the older stuff might need a bit of work, but actually once it's fixed, it's the most valuable housing stock.
And that's the irony, isn't it? Because for decades and decades, it wasn't.
But yeah.
I was just going to say, so we all agree Bristol's got really popular, you know, that you can't kind of undo that. So I guess the big question is, how does Bristol grow? How do we house all the people that want to come here because they like Bristol, without then forcing everyone out, because we're a very popular but very small city, hemmed in by 3 other local authorities, and social housing can't do everything, because if you build social housing in South Gloss, you can't move over that council boundary. So I guess for everyone, how do we, in practical terms, provide homes and opportunities for everybody that wants to come to Bristol? And we should be happy that people want to come to Bristol. Like the fact that when I meet people and they're like, I moved here from London, and my default response is to roll my eyes, is a bad thing, because we should be happy that people want to join us in Bristol. But then when they do, all I see it as is people are coming here and forcing us out. So kind of how do we grow in a way without causing gentrification then?
I got some suggestions.
I mean, build more social housing as a basic one.
Yeah.
But you know, that takes time, it's not quick. But also when you're building more social housing, one of the things we've started introducing some areas of local lettings policies. So a certain amount of the social housing that's let out will be let out to people in housing need within a defined local area. We've put one in Lot Leeds because they're getting something like 800 new homes built over the next 3 or 4 years. It's a huge amount. It's going to really impact the community. And so what we're doing is saying for the social rented, affordable rented ones, 50% of those will go to people in housing need. The hope is then that frees up other properties, right? That actually might be people under occupied by 2 bedrooms.
But then are people going to move to Lockleys? I wouldn't say is facing the same kind of things that St Paul's, Eastern, segments at Horfield. You know, like we're not seeing the same kind of, because there are poor areas on the outskirts like Lawrence Weston, Hartcliffe that people still aren't touching. People don't want to go to Hartcliffe.
Not yet, right?
No, but they will.
And this is the amazing thing is, there's such a thing that theorists talk about, super gentrification. Yeah. Notting Hill, went from 1958 Teddy Boy-led riots to Hugh Grant. To 1999. You were thinking it. No, really. 1999 was in Notting Hill around that, and that was boom. Now Notting Hill, £11 million houses. I think just a few suggested policies that could free up that availability and allow spaces. And you're Max,
No, I was just going to say, I think Tom touched on it earlier around density, and I think you see major conurbations and the space is tight, and quite often, the way in which those cities and centres are going is upwards. I told my development colleague whether I should mention this one or not, but we bought Clifton Down Shopping Centre, you may be aware of, and I think it's got 8-storey car park, 7-storey car park. I think 6 of those stories are never used at all. It's just dead space. I'm not saying we're going to build right on top of it, but
I thought I'd open cans of worms.
Yeah, but actually, it's one of the most prosperous areas of Bristol with very little social housing, and we've bought the biggest shopping centre there. So there is different ways of doing things, and I think going back to what Tom said around, there's actually some really good examples of high-rise living that is social housing, that is excellent, that does have gyms, that does have activity within it across Europe, and we need to learn from cities that work as well. Car reliance, going back to that consumption point, how do we build locally so we don't continually rely on that infrastructure.
A few other suggestions, just quickly, yes or no, off for your question. Do you think that it would help? Abolish the right to buy?
I would.
No.
So I would, and
Go on.
So the problem with right to buy historically was not the policy in of itself, it was that the social housing stock was not replaced. If the social housing stock had been replaced, we would not have the current housing crisis that we do. But yes, I would abolish it, because I think, particularly from a local authority, we need to protect our existing housing stock. We're going to start building more council housing, that's great, but then if it all gets bought, we're going to be stuck with...
You're playing catch up, aren't you?
Yeah.
And right to buy, if you don't know, just to be clear, if you probably do, is just the right to buy your property. You were able to do it before 1980, that Thatcher policy, but it was seldom granted. Other views, right to buy,
I totally concur with what Tom said on that. I think basically if you can build one-for-one replacement, great. That's an amazing opportunity for somebody to buy their home. Quite often what we've seen is people then can't afford to maintain that home once they've bought it. So yeah, I'd get rid of it.
Thinking about those properties, the council properties that I spoke about earlier, about 40-45% of council properties since 1980 belonging to buy-to-let landlords. Another suggestion off the back of your question there, abolishing buy-to-let mortgages. Another suggestion there. Any views on that one?
I mean, they've curbed it, haven't they, substantially? I think the rules have changed around buy-to-let mortgages, still a lot less popular. They've also recently changed the rules around whether you can take interest payments as expenses as well, and that's one of the things that sort of turned off interest. The private rent sector is completely out of control, and this is, well, I think you'll probably know that if you're renting at the moment. And we need to get a grip on that, and it's why we need rent control as well, and why we're looking at it.
Can I throw another one in?
Yeah.
Empty homes, CPO, every empty home in the country.
Yeah.
And make the process easier as well, because it is a nightmare at the moment.
1.5 million homes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'd second that. Rent controls 100%. Like, the idea of having more affordable areas which people then move into from a higher income, having controlled rents and prevents those people who were, long-term residents being forced out when those rents eventually rise. Having secure tenancies for people, having an end to all evictions so that people aren't just booted out by their landlord, and then that landlord raises the rents for this new gentrifiers that are moving into the area. As you said at the beginning, housing is like fundamental to all of the driving forces of gentrification, and private renters are time and time again being exploited as a result of our corrupt housing system.
I think with rent control, actually, private landlords, it works in other countries. Why can't it work here?
Yeah, so that's what we've got. It's basically the piece what we're doing around the rent commission is being jointly done with the University of Bristol. So we've got an academic who's done a lot of research in this and looked at models in other countries all over the world, because you've got to make sure you look at unintended consequences and intended consequences of any system that you might introduce, which can be made up of several components. You know, if you're going to bring in rent control, you better make sure that your regulation of the quality of housing stock is also pretty robust, so that there isn't then underinvestment in that housing stock and it declines and deteriorates. So yeah, you have to think about the other aspects, and of course there's no substitute for building more social housing.
Of course. We'll just have one more question, then if anyone wants to ask anything after, everyone's going to be around, so we can just have a chat. Bianca.
Just to add to that conversation, Airbnb.
Sorry, excuse me.
Oh no, sorry.
No, I'm happy to discuss.
Sorry. Okay, we'll come to you after, Wolfgang. Sorry, Bianca, go. But Bianca, if you want to go, come to you as, after. Sorry about that.
Apologies. Very quickly, Airbnb, can anything be done about that? I mean, if somebody's wanting to rent out or sublet their spare room occasionally, whatever, but dwellings that aren't actually people's homes, that's a real issue. As our friend said, this city's growing, there isn't enough housing for the number of people who want to be here. I don't know if anyone saw that a homelessness charity, Julian Trust, has done up these properties that they are renting out through Airbnb. They're putting all those profits back into the charity, but it's still pretty gross that these are now places people could be living, but it's just being holiday lets. What can be done about that? Can that be controlled in some way?
We need more powers. The government have started looking at it. Scotland is the one to look at actually, because they've been consulting on a registration scheme, and they've told all areas of all local authority areas within Scotland they've got by a certain date, I think it's 2024, don't quote me on that, that they've got to bring their own scheme in. So it comes back to things like licensing as well, around which we've been introducing various parts of the city, you know, having those powers to be able to bring that in, but then making sure it's not cumbersome as well, that we've got to jump through all these hoops with central governments, devolve the powers and let us implement it.
Yeah, and sorry, Wolfgang.
Yeah, my name's Wolfgang, and I'm working currently as an architect in retrofit, but I've got a long history in housing campaigning, and as part of a thing called Defend Council Housing, which was trying to get councils the right to build. And I could probably go on for hours, but I'm not going to.